to waste its time. If you have no defense, it chases you.
It is a ruling on the foundations. Business has been conducted in a certain way.
Banks take money from us, depositors. All of us seated here have got money in the bank. And even before you walk out, they've given that money to somebody else.
Deeply incisive.
The law enjoins us to be answerable to the sovereign of the country.
Our members of the force, we have always been demanding officers to be highly disciplined and being accountable to people of Uganda.
Authentically symbolic and insightful.
We should work so hard to evacuate this power.
Behind the headlines, every Wednesday at 10 p.m. with Charles Odongto.
A very welcome.
Probably the most experienced talk show moderator in Uganda, with a team of illustrious panelists. Honorable Margaret Mohanga, a veteran journalist, legislator, entrepreneur and development consultant. And Ramadan Gobi, an economist and university don.
I've really got perturbed that in Uganda we are building parties with no membership subscription.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda. It is intellectually engaging.
Court does not sit to waste its time. If you have no defense, it chases you.
It is a ruling on the foundations. Business has been conducted in a certain way.
Banks take money from us, depositors. All of us seated here have got money in the bank. And even before you walk out, they've given that money to somebody else.
Deeply incisive.
The law enjoins us to be answerable to the sovereign of the country.
Our members of the force, we have always been demanding officers to be highly disciplined and being accountable to people of Uganda.
Authentically symbolic and insightful.
We should work so hard to evacuate this power.
Behind the headlines, every Wednesday at 10 p.m. with Charles Odongto.
A very welcome.
Probably the most experienced talk show moderator in Uganda, with a team of illustrious panelists. Honorable Margaret Mohanga, a veteran journalist, legislator, entrepreneur and development consultant. And Ramadan Gobi, an economist and university don.
I've really got perturbed that in Uganda we are building parties with no membership subscription.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
What's wrong with the instruction?
To lose your temper within me. It's gotta be something other than kidnapping people.
Maybe in America. Maybe in America.
Go ahead. Bully boss story. Cool?
No. No, it's not cool.
Cool.
No, it's not cool.
Tired?
Yeah.
And maybe it's time to try something new.
You really need to see this. Launch operation.
Let's go fishing.
Bottom.
Hilarious.
Launch
Good evening and welcome to the 29th edition of UBC Behind the Headlines. My name is Tony Kent Kyazze, sitting in for Charles Odonktho, who is taking some rest, courtesy of the activities he's been involved in for the whole bit of time getting backside. It's a wonderful time, it's a wonderful moment, and it's definitely a wonderful interaction that we are going to be getting into just a little while to come. Today, we are going to be looking at the implication of the suspension of the DGF activities in Uganda, and of course DGF being the democratic governance facility that so many of us have spoken about, and of course as well seen NGOs react towards. Well, with me in studio is definitely a blend of guests, and I'll be starting off with the one closest to me, that is the ED, Executive Director of the coalition, that is the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda. That is Madam Charity Kalebu Ahimbisiwe. You're welcome to UBC Behind the Headlines.
Thank you very much, Kent, and a very good evening to our viewers. I am excited to be here today.
We too are having you in the studios of UBC. And next to Charity, in the order that I started with, that is from myself towards Charity, now towards the other side, is Mr. Patrick Onen Ezaga. He's the Public Relations Officer of the National Bureau for NGOs. You're welcome to UBC Behind the Headlines.
Thank you very much, Kent. Good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here to share ideas on these issues.
Wow. And of course, what about the milestone that it is today? She has often come our way via Zoom, and this time round, she says, no, let's join Kent and make a difference for those of us that are watching. And that's none other than Honorable Margaret Muhanga. Well, she's actually a Mugole in the making because she's as well coming back this time round for the 2021-2026 term of office for Burahia County. It's a bit of a problem for me to pronounce Burahia, but I hope I've done it well, Honorable. No. Really? No, you're welcome to UBC.
Thank you and good evening, viewers. I am not coming back as an MP for Burahia.
Really?
I contested in Fort Portal North Division.
Okay.
3 sub-counties were carved off Burahia County to form Fort Portal Tourism City. Okay. So I contested in Fort Portal North Division.
Wow. Wow. We can see already we are blessed with a bit of information. Thank you so very much, and congratulations though.
Thank you.
All right. We shall be joined by Ramadan Gobi, the professori, actually told he's going to be joining us in a little while to come. He's a policy analyst, an economist, and a lecturer at Makerere University Business School. Once in a while, he'll tell you he hates politics, but definitely loves economics so very much. You're welcome to UBC Behind the Headlines, Ramadan. Okay, probably let's just continue. We'll be picking it up at that at a certain stage when we are into harmony with Ramadan Gobi. Ladies and gentlemen, we all must have noted today there has been the restoration of internet fully, and this time around it looks to be people are back to happiness, the happiness they've not had in the last 31 days. I'm not so sure what you guys make of it, but probably the one that has been so much in the need of internet getting restored is Ramadan Gobi. We might have to get his as the last input. But let me start off with Honorable Margaret Muhanga. Internet is back, although Facebook is still having a bit of issues.
I have always been on the internet, so I don't know which one is back.
Wow, you've always been on the internet?
Yes, I've been on.
How have you been on the internet?
VPN.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I don't know which internet was off.
Because Honorable Ogwang has been making mention of whoever is on VPN.
I saw it on Twitter. I actually asked that government refunds my OTT.
Okay.
Because I paid in January up to December.
All right. I'm hoping
and
that...
I don't know whether they are going to compensate us for those days.
I just hope we shall have you on the show to the end, because I'm worried Honorable Gwang might come and probably arrest you.
He was also on.
And
so were many others.
So, Honorable Muhanga, you've not missed out on the internet.
Nothing.
Wow. My brother Patrick, the internet is back. Fully.
Yeah, I think in many ways, internet had become part of our social life and our social fabric. So the fact that it was off must have inconvenienced very many people. So I think it's quite a sigh of relief that it is back, without really delving into the circumstances that led to it being off or something. You know, anything you're used to, when it gets back, you breathe a sigh of relief. I think a lot of things will go back to normalcy, businesses, and so on and so forth. So I think it's fine. It's good it's back.
Wow. By the way, for you that is watching us right now, you might have realized we might not be having our masks on to fullness. It is simply because the distancing between ourselves is working out perfect, as recommended by the Ministry of Health as well as the World Health Organization. So just in case the masks are off a little, don't you get worried. We are observing some of those SOPs, but in a different way, which is, for this case, social distancing. Madam Charity, the internet is back, and I know you're this one person that has had issues somewhere, somehow. How does it feel?
Of course, very exciting that Ugandans can now get back on the internet. For us, we moved on to the internet long time ago, as soon as they switched on the internet. Actually, what you should be saying is that social media is back. But the first time they switched back the internet, we all went on to VPN. But during elections, we were off because the internet was off. But the internet switch off, government has had to incur heavy losses with the turning off of social media platforms. There are people who make a living out of Facebook, there are people who make a living out of Twitter, and there are people who make a living on WhatsApp. So those social media platforms did affect the way business is done. People take pictures of clothes and sell them using social media platforms. Now, it was a sad moment for those people who did not even have a chance to get onto VPN. Remember that people in the rural areas actually just use the ordinary
internet,
the ordinary
basically
social media handles, social media handles to sell out their products or to even access outside markets. It also affected the tourism industry quite a lot, because a lot of money flows in through the internet. And so the time when it was off, it was terrible. But the time when they switched it on, and for us, we moved onto VPN, we didn't really feel what the rest of them were going through. It was a bulk of them, but government is now going to take a big tide trying to convince people to go back to pay OTT, because they all migrated onto VPN. So if I have enjoyed VPN, how again do I come back to pay OTT?
Quite interesting. Looks like we have a couple of rebels on the show this time round, because of course VPN qualifies one as a rebel in the words of Minister Ogwang. But of course, Ramadan Gobi, I very well know you tweeted one time on social media, and your tweet was all about making a request to government to switch back social media to its fullness. This time around it's back, and I'm wondering, just from what you had Madam, that is Honorable Muhanga, as well as Madam Charity speak, they made mention of one particular entity, and that is the option of VPN. In your view, and of course with the happiness that you have the return of internet coming our way, do you feel the resources, the monies that went to the treasury back in the days shall still go back to the treasury from the internet switching back?
Thank you. I think the issue of internet is quite critical, and I'm happy that government has switched back the social media. I know a number of people right away when the internet came back, they switched, as the two ladies in the studios have indicated, they used the VPN. And, but you realize that so many people were not on social media, because VPN has its own challenges, as its users will tell you. And many younger people, although they have been using it, they have been paying an arm and a leg to pay for the internet, because those applications they use of the virtual network, they are quite very good at consuming the bundles. And I would say that Ugandans have been using this VPN since, I think, 2016. Some of them have never paid OTT. It is something which government needs also to look into, why we should tax the internet, I mean the social media. I've been one of those who was saying, if you are to tax social media, then make the tax indirect, because when you make it direct, you are as if punishing those who are using the social media directly. And I think it has also caused a lot of anger, especially among the younger people, and justifiably so. So if at all you need to raise some revenue from this also area, I don't see why government does not tax the bundles, and then you leave the social media free so that people can access it. But as also you know, my views on the time when it was switched off for security reasons, I was also very clear that it was worth the undertaking, because many people have been using social media to, I think, propagate a lot of wrong information, actually misinformation, and they confuse us, and sometimes they were causing a lot of concern in the security area. So, for that matter, I don't think government took a wrong decision to switch off around that time when the tensions were very high.
Wow.
But they have taken so long to switch us back on, because some of us, our students, use social media to learn. They use especially WhatsApp to get the links of this, for example, the very medium I'm using right now to access my classes, and they couldn't learn for a couple of weeks. And I think this was a bit counterproductive to the government effort of going online. So I'm happy that internet is back on, and some younger people should mobilize some reward for me for making that tweet. I hope it also contributed partly to the appeals to switch back on social media.
I thank you so much, Ramadan Gobi, Professori, the way the Italians opt to pronounce that. You can actually follow us on YouTube. For those of you that wish to stream live, you can follow us on YouTube. And of course, that handle is UBC Television Uganda. UBC Television Uganda on YouTube. And just in case, you can as well follow us on Twitter. That is at UBC TV Uganda. At UBC TV Uganda. Meanwhile, the hashtag is UBC Behind the Headlines. Now, we are really blessed to have Mr. Patrick Onen Ezaga, and of course, being the Public Relations Officer of the National Bureau for NGOs, we now turn all the attention at you. Why? Because of the suspension of the DGF activities in Uganda, the Democratic Governance Facility. We don't know what exactly went wrong, but we want to know what you, the guys at the Bureau, have for us before we can actually continue unfolding this particular discussion today.
Well, thank you, Kent. I think right from the onset it is important to put certain facts clearly. That I think it is clear that the suspension of DGF was not done by the NGO Bureau. It is probably also public knowledge now that DGF itself is not an NGO. And therefore it means it is not under the supervision of the NGO Bureau, because it is a basket of different embassies, including the European Union and the rest. They pull their resources together into one basket. And so what is the link with the NGO Bureau is that a bulk of their funding goes to NGOs. So I thought we should start off from that level, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there to make it appear as if the NGO Bureau is the one that, you know, has closed the DGF, and the media has not helped much, because they even say, you know, this is the NGOs are receiving lots of funds, and this DGF has closed an NGO. Friends are asking me, says, you guys, now you are closing the DGF, which is a very big NGO, and we've had to belabor to say, look, first, it is not an NGO, but a lot of the beneficiaries of its support are NGOs. Having said that, like I indicated earlier, as a bureau, government entities work together in most cases, and everybody knows the origin of the decision. It came from His Excellency the President, who I'm sure we know has the machinery at his disposal to establish and find out information and all this. So as a bureau, what we found interesting was that the President, in his wisdom, using his information sources, took that decision. As a government entity, we are duty bound to stand by and, you know, follow the instructions of the head of state. So all that has unfolded, a lot of it has played out on the turf away from the NGO Bureau itself. And that's why we felt that, okay, a decision of this nature simply requires any state agency to ensure its implementation. What was intriguing is about, especially these discussions about DGF and its suspension, was mainly because if you saw, the President's letter was addressed to the Minister. So from where we stand, this was still a matter at their level. And so many things happened so fast. Statements issued, discussions unfolded. It is normal. With social media these days, things can leak and so on and so forth. But it's important to sieve. You know, like my former colleague Ramadana said, social media itself carries so much with it. There is both truth and untruth almost in equal measure. And sometimes people may not know the difference. So at the beginning, the initial impression that was created was, first of all, wrong. And once it starts off from a wrong footing of this nature, you play the chess game, because it then takes off like a bushfire, and you're trying to catch up to say, hey, you guys, this is not really the issue. But that's what, you know, information is. And that's why we felt that, okay, on our part as a regulator of the sector, we are also eager to understand what else is coming from the origin of this directive in terms of the way forward. So we expect that there should be engagement at that level, and as a bureau, the information will come to us and we'll act as required.
So if I may put it to you,
yeah.
What are the roles of the bureau?
In a nutshell, the NGO Bureau is a regulator of the NGO sector as it is. The Bureau is charged with registration of NGOs in the country, monitoring, inspection, and overseeing the operations of non-governmental organizations in the country, generally. And so in so doing, any NGO that is working within this country is under the direct supervision of the NGO Bureau as the arm of government created under the Ministry of Internal Affairs to handle that sector. So it will be the equivalent of NIRA or UNRWA, you know, along that line. So primarily the role of the Bureau is really to manage the sector, get the NGOs registered, and ensure that they're working within the confines.
Now, working within the confines would mean something to do with perhaps, you know, following their particular trail, or maybe, yes, compliance.
Correct.
In this kind of aspect where something came the way it came, the DGF being suspended, have they come to you? Have they run to you? Have you received their kinds of cries and outcries?
I can tell you, Kent, yes, you know, many of the NGOs that benefited or still benefit from the funding support of DGF communicate. The NGO Bureau on a daily basis, we keep receiving issues from the sector. And when this came up, of course, emails were sent and phone calls were made to say, hey, you guys, what's happening? But as I've indicated, the origin of the decision was not the NGO Bureau. So we were in this situation where it is His Excellency the President who initiated it, and we also had to use our internal mechanisms to try and understand what was the origin, what was the motivation, but all in the direction of trying to ensure that we follow the instructions as given.
Okay. Yeah. Let's turn to Charity. Charity, you are the ED of SEDU, and I was doing a bit of recap. I realized SEDU is not a beneficiary of the DGF, and probably that dates back to about a year and some months, or approximately 2 years. How have you guys been surviving at SEDU, minus that kind of facilitation from DGF?
Okay. So you know that non-government organizations are supposed to have what we call sustainability plans. So SEDU, after suffering a setback of not being able to get funding from the DGF, went through what we called an institutional analysis and strengthening of the institution to sustain it. We have members that are spread across the country, and there are 927 civil society organizations and 27,000 individuals. Now these members, we sat with some of them on Zoom within the regions to discuss how to take SEDU forward. And some of them collected money to run the activities of the organization, because they knew now that we had to go through the processes that we do because we are Ugandans. We believe the cause in which we are. And so the rest of us that were at the Secretariat became what we call volunteers. We did not have salaries that were coming in straight, but we had to volunteer for the good of the nation. And so you would ask me, why would Charity give up her money, which she used to have, to choose to volunteer for an organization like SEDU? The mandate of SEDU is what drives the coalition. And so that is the sustainability plan that drove us through. And of course, we also continued to write small projects for different people. And towards October, UN Women came on board to support a voter mobilization campaign. Beram class, Mulembegwa Digital, and later on there is what they are calling peace messaging. We partnered with another NGO called Nice Uganda. For them, they look more at civic education, but we look more at voter education. Now, because of the need to educate a voter to know what to do when they go to polls, it was critical to us that as Ugandans, we use our own money if the donors cannot give us money. So that is how we have managed to sustain the organization. So the members themselves have been contributing. So if I may ask Madam Charity,
what exactly caused a fallout, if I may call it so anyway?
Now, there was a bit of a misunderstanding between SEDU leadership at the time and the DGF. DGF seemed to act on rumors at the time that people created stories around SEDU not accountable, not able to do their work according to the framework. You know, we write projects, and when you write a project, they want you to follow that project to the letter. But when you work in a terrain of elections, elections are very unpredictable. You've just come out of elections right now, and so many things change on a daily basis. Today you have violence, tomorrow you have this happening, tomorrow you have arbitrary arrests, the other day you can't find so and so. Then civil society members themselves are not available. You have to make statements. The press is threatened. So a lot of things keep changing as the tide goes. Yes. And so sticking to the creed, to the document, sometimes becomes difficult. You have to remain flexible. And so when you become flexible, then you're a thief, which is not necessarily true. And so we stuck to our guns. We provided accountability, the activities as we run them, and we got into discussions with the DGF. And I think at the end of it all, we were in a good place. We were supposed to have had those relations get back, but they wanted to just be sure that we have systems in place that they felt comfortable with. And and then they could move on from there.
Before I turn to Honorable Muhanga, do you feel the NGOs that have been under the umbrella of DGF were probably doing the right thing?
Yes.
For them to keep under that kind of umbrella?
Yes. The DGF is a good basket fund. We have to look at the pros and cons of DGF. DGF is a fund that has supported so many organizations, 95 organizations they're supporting right now. Now, those 95 organizations, Kent, it's not just the organization that benefits.
Yeah.
When Kent gets money, he's going to pay for his mother, he's going to look after his father, he's going to look after his children, he's going to look after his children's children. So there's a chain of people. And then there is these service providers who you pay services to bring stationery, do this for me, there's a consultancy here, then there is NSSF, there is payee. All these things are coming out of just one organization. So even the government itself is benefiting, and there is an economy around these organizations. And then also the ultimate benefit of the work that the NGOs do. When we talk about things like the scorecard for the Justice Law Center, when we do the scorecard for Parliament, all we are doing is to strengthen the institution. Said for it, one of the institutions it works closely with is the Electoral Commission. Try and help it to have better systems in place when they're conducting elections. Why do we see some ills happening? Where we trace them, we help them, we show them that at this place, these things happen. Like, for example, when we talk about the malfunction of the biometrics, we're able to show them where exactly it happened and what the problem was. It is lack of training. Next time as we go to an election, can you train better? Can you make sure that these people have learned before?
Improve civic education.
It is more a support function for government processes, that government has things it wants to run and these NGOs are there. So I do not agree with the statement that NGOs were involved necessarily, all of them or some of them, in subversive activities, because then the work of people like Patrick and Okello at the NGO Bureau would mean that it is idle. Because they ask, what exactly are you doing? You give documentation. This is what my organization is about, the goals, the values, the aspirations, the objectives.
The NGO Bureau should be your shock absorber.
Yeah, they know what we are doing. The DGF knows, NGO Bureau knows, the Minister of Finance knows. All these documents are there. So there is nothing like there is anything hidden under a table. No, the documents are clear.
Let's leave it at that for now and turn to Honorable Muhanga. Honorable Muhanga, there's been a lot of talk in the aspect of this particular suspension, with many referring to it as a political move. Do you feel this was a political move? Being that you are a legislator, was this a political move?
It may have been a political move, but one thing you need to note is that the DGF has helped a lot of people. I could have been a beneficiary in one way or another. I have actually been a beneficiary because I belong to the Uganda Media Women Association. They've been giving us a lot of trainings, even when I was a journalist. And also network of women in politics. Sometimes they even hold workshops for us, women in media and women in politics. They join us together, we hold workshops, we have had a lot of trainings from them. So really not all was bad. They mean well. But I suspect that some NGOs who are benefiting from it have been misusing the fund. I will give an example. There's a time when I went to attend a workshop. It was organized by some NGO whose name I won't say, because intelligence will come after me tomorrow. And the things they were talking, I thought were not supposed to be part of the agenda. We sat in this conference. There were women from many districts and from women councils. And the topic was like, who should they vote for? And they were giving them direction. That you see, in this case, you should vote for so and so, which I thought was out of their mandate. Because they were supposed to train the women to go and train other rural women who may not access these facilities on how to view a good, or how to identify a good leader. Now, instead of telling them how to identify a good leader, they started bringing in names of people, demonizing others, praising others, and I thought it wasn't the right thing for them to do. So we went for a break with some groups of women, and we discussed the matter at length. Many women were not happy. Others said, okay, it's okay for them to teach us really the traits of a good leader, but for them to point out that this one is bad, the other one is good, the other one is an amateur, the other one is, it was not necessary. So sometimes the government, acting from its own sovereignty, may stop some of the funding. I have seen people, a lot of people on social media have been posting abuses as usual, insults, which won't hurt anybody, but hurts the one who has sent it. That government is always scared to be challenged. We have just had an election, so who is being challenged and for what? They also said, you see, you don't have money, you are a poor person, but even if you didn't have food, Kent, would you allow another person or another man to come and dictate what should happen in your house just because you have no money?
No way.
You'd stand your ground. Better is a den of herbs where love is. Isn't that what? Yes. I remember it was a book in literature. Is it Jane Eyre? No, it's the Mayor of Casterbridge, something like that. But you'd rather eat herbs than good beef, but you are in your own home and making your own decisions. And so government sometimes comes in because of those NGOs that I have pointed out. There are so many NGOs which have changed people's lives in many areas. I've been to the north in the aftermath of the election, I mean of the war in the north, and now after many years they've changed so many people's lives. They've given hope to communities. The former abductees, the Aboke girls, many of them have been taken over by these NGOs, trained them, given them hope for a better tomorrow.
Okay.
Now, these others that give a bad name to all NGOs, you will always find there are few. And their leaders are not like Charity before us here. They come on TV and demonize government and demonize individuals. That is not your work. If you have an NGO, stick to your rules. That I am an NGO, I'm supposed to be impartial. I'm not supposed to be in politics. Actually, most of them are supposed to be apolitical. But you find somebody on a daily basis is demonizing some political head.
Activism.
That is activism. So you have left your work, you have gone into, you have crossed the red line. So if government comes and takes away your computers and things, and then the next day you are in the media crying for, but you have caused this to yourself. There are so many NGOs. I've belonged to many of them as a female leader and a former journalist, and I have seen how much we have benefited as women.
So somewhere, somehow, it was probably a political move.
Yes, it was.
Let's turn to, thank you so much, Honorable Muhanga.
But of course, drawing from the intelligence they were getting from civil intelligence, that some NGOs are not doing the right thing.
Okay. There's a bit of a question that I was meant to take to Ramadan Gobi, but I think the technical team is trying to get a hold of him. Probably let me first turn back to Bwana Patrick Onen. When Madame Margaret was making mention of the points she just made, she highlighted something that brings in the aspect of NGOs, what their role is, and the likes. What are the roles of NGOs? And two, how can they best perform in circumstances like now, in a situation where financing is a little curtailed?
Thank you, Kent. I think NGOs, by their nature...
Did you say you think?
Yes, yes.
You don't know? You
yes,
think?
let me make my statement, then you'll see where I'm coming from.
Okay, okay.
The reason I'm thinking is because, you see, when an organization walks to the NGO bureau to get registered, at that point it is very difficult to know the intention. That's why I'm thinking. The reality is there are so many people who come with a good heart, like Honorable is saying, to support others on a philanthropic level. But there is also a group at the point of registration who have premeditated and discovered that the best avenue to penetrate is by forming an NGO.
Let me just ask you this, as you continue giving us that whole bit of dissection. When registering an NGO, is it not clear that I'm registering as NGO this to do ABC?
That's what I was coming to.
Okay.
First of all, it should be noted that it is the organization, it is the NGOs themselves that sit on their own, determine their mission, their vision, their objectives, what it is that they want to engage in. That decision is theirs. They put this documentation together and bring it to the bureau. So at that point, nobody determines for them what they want to be. But what I wanted to drive closely towards is the fact that two things happen. There are those who use the NGO sector as a cover, but underneath there's a different intention.
Okay.
And at the point of registration, you will not be able to realize. It is 1, 2, 3 years later when they are now working. That's when you get to know that, okay, you guys are getting away from your set objectives. And please note, the objectives are set by themselves. The other aspect is, you see, the NGO sector, and like Charity was saying, the issue of survival and sustainability is what has made many of them adapt. Today there is funding in election observation and so on. The elections are done. You can't write a proposal and think you'll get funding for that.
Maybe for
until the next cycle.
5 years. Yes.
So you are forced to repackage yourself and go pro your environment. Now that is by the nature of the sector.
Yes.
The sustainability question is a very big one, and probably that's what makes them become so prone. Now, as already mentioned, it could just be a handful, but you know, 1 or 2 bad apples in the tree can affect the entire tree.
True.
So that whole problem of trying to be relevant, we know NGOs that the ED is the father, the mother is the director of finance, a cousin somewhere is the driver, and the whole thing is within a homestead.
Friends, a group of
That
friends.
tells you the original intention was just to set up for that purpose. Now, when such things are happening, for us as a bureau, as a regulator, there is a very important sector we are focused at. The ultimate beneficiaries of these different NGOs, they need to be protected. They are citizens of this country. It's not news for me to start announcing how many NGOs have defrauded innocent people, poor people, collected money from them, and so on and so forth. So at some point, when it becomes too much, and there is credible information that the direction that is being taken is not good, either for the beneficiaries or for the country as a whole, somebody has to step in and call you to order. Otherwise, you can't leave them like just animals doing whatever they want. Now, this is not to say that they are not. Actually, I think probably over 95 or whatever % of the NGOs are doing a good job. It is very clear NGOs complement government efforts. Nobody denies that. But at the same time, in so doing, we should not lose sight of the other small group that are damaging the reputation of the sector. And this is what preoccupies the Bureau every day.
Wow, quite interesting. So if I may ask you, before this whole bit of suspension came through, as the head boy or the headmaster or probably the head teacher of the rest of the NGOs as a bureau, did government notify you of this direction? Sorry about that.
As I indicated earlier, that government, of course, works interrelatedly. And several times, different sectors of government come across information which can be shared with the regulator or which may be withheld for security reasons, for instance.
Yes.
Even if the NGO Bureau is a regulator and the matter is still at the level of His Excellency, at the level of security circles, it may have been premature. So, to answer you directly, I cannot say that the Bureau should have been consulted on a decision of this nature. Because one, the available information that led to such a decision was not in our docket in terms of availability.
But you would have played advocate for the ones that you
Which the Bureau still does and is continuing to do. But you see, the issue here is, if there is information about some NGO somewhere, we work with the district NGO monitoring committees which have the DSOs in them.
Yes.
And using those structures, we are supposed to have feelers on the ground. But I can tell you, the people who use the sector for those other purposes, there is no way anybody is going to come and present a proposal for funding to DGF clearly saying that we want to overthrow government, give us money. They will hide it under service delivery here, supporting a poor child there, paying fees there. Then you see the impact in the kind of messages that Honorable was talking about. So in this particular case, Financial Intelligence Authority, for instance, may have its information. If they need information from the Bureau, they come. NGOs file annual returns with the NGO Bureau, indicating the activities of the year, the funding that has come in. But between you and me, I can tell you that not all that you see written is actually the truth. The funding that may come in through the banks and so on, which is traceable, you will see it on paper. But is the bank account the only avenue through which money comes? There are many others. Now the Bureau, as a sector, as a regulator, we may not have the intelligence capability to know that NGO A or NGO B is getting alternative sources from elsewhere until such information is brought to our attention. So it's a question of a few people trying to be too smart.
Transparency.
And it's also about compliance issues. Many of them don't actually follow their own set objectives. The Bureau never sets objectives for any organization.
So what happens in that kind of scenario?
Yes.
I'm looking at probably SEDU and Charity failing upon their kind of obligations. And of course, you're the mandate that patronage does the patronage upon them. What do you do for them? Is there punishment of sorts?
Yes, we call them to order. Even today, we were having discussions with NGOs who have now diverted. Within themselves, at the board level, you'll find one group is saying, no, you guys, we need to reorient. We need to focus here. And until you officially indicate to the Bureau that our objectives are changing and you have reviewed your documents, the Bureau's role is to ensure that you stick by the very regulations you set yourself.
Would it be too much to ask if we made an inquiry of what exactly you mean by calling them to order?
Calling them to order means if you're found to be going outside the relevant regulations, the law is very clear. The NGO Act is very clear. It indicates what reprimands are available depending on whatever situation you find yourself in. So when I say we call them to order, it means we can call an organization and say, hey, this is what your constitution says. You must have an annual general assembly. The executive director should report to so and so. And then you find 5 years, there is no AGM. And then animosity starts building. Because somebody is stuck in the seat as the ED, does not
course, not charity.
No, not charity. This is a classical case of what the other NGOs should actually be doing. You really need to share this, because you can see without that funding, SEDU is standing.
It is.
And it is going ahead.
Okay.
So many NGOs moved from the intensive care unit to the grave with COVID, because there was no alternative source of funding. Everybody's looking at that one source. Now, if the NGO collapses, the bigger question to ask is, what happens to the beneficiaries they were supporting? Who takes them over? People are looking after orphans. There's an NGO looking after orphans, innocent children. The top bosses quarrel because of money, the organization collapses. Who takes over these little citizens? Those are the big issues the sector should be discussing.
Okay.
And I can tell you there are those NGOs that are focused on that. So that's where we really come in to support and make sure the NGO sector continues complementing government.
All right, thank you so much, Patrick. I think we now have Ramadan Gobi back online. And for you, Ramadan, it's definitely something that you love so very much, something to do with economy, something to do with money. We are looking at a scenario where perhaps it's about 500 billion Uganda shillings being frozen as a result of this particular suspension of the DGF. In your view, do you feel the economy will be losing out on anything, or perhaps there is going to be better ways to have the economy grow, even minus the 500 billion Uganda shillings?
Thank you, Tony. In 2006, one of my favorite development economists, William Easterling, wrote a book, The White Man's Burden, in which he was actually attacking what he called the tragic hubris of the West to appoint themselves as those who can improve the lot of the developing countries or the people in the developing countries. And I've been teaching that book to my students of development economics over years. And I can see it a lot playing out in this very issue we are discussing, the controversy we are discussing. Of course, Uganda is among those countries that need more deepening of democracy, more deepening of accountability, and the DGF as a fund is positioned as one which is intended to empower the citizens and ensure that state upholds the citizens' rights. So it's like the self-chosen kind of good which Easterly was talking about in his White Man's Burden. But I would think that the president raised some fundamental issues in that letter he wrote. First and foremost, I want to first allude to that. The first point I saw, he said that Uganda has no say or oversight over this fund. And to me, I think that's a critical point. If at all it is correct that this is a fund which was put in place and it's being run independent of government for the state, which protects the interests of Ugandans, at least legally, although legitimately some people may argue otherwise, then he had a point, among other points which he raised. So I would think that the suspension and review of the fund should not end up into cancellation or termination of the fund. And the way I've heard people discussing it, it's as if the head of state in his letter said that we are terminating this fund. I don't think that was the spirit. He said, let's review it, the way it is managed and administered. I've heard from Charity that at one time the fund administrators acted on rumors and suspended the fund from some of the beneficiaries, like the NGO Forum, like SEDU and others. And I don't think in the same spirit they should be now very much worried when someone suspends the entire fund on rumors. Because also I had, I think it was in the media, the Minister of Finance was quoted as saying that the president acted on wrong intelligence. And I think that's also a very fundamental allegation which needs to be looked into, because to me, the president of a country is the most informed person in the country, because he gets credible intelligence, actionable intelligence, and by the time he picks his pen, he has been informed beyond doubt that some things are happening. And he's the most informed citizen than all of us, because for him, there are people who are paid by the state to gather information for him. But now to go back to your question, 500 billion, 5 years, 100 billion per year, I would think that much as we are making a lot of noise, the sky will not come down when you trade off 100 billion a year. We are talking of an economy which every year generates about 135 trillion shillings a year in what we call GDP. People carrying out activities and generate this money. I would want really Africans to stop this tendency of us thinking that we can't survive because of these small peanuts which are brought into our countries. I am not here to say that it was correct for government to stop this fund, but we shouldn't play it as if the sky is going to come down, because DGF has been given a few days to first review its operations. I would think that the fact that actually hot money, let me tell you some bit of economics. All countries very, very eagerly and carefully, actually cautiously, monitor what we call hot money. Money which comes into your economy, circulates around, sometimes can cause more damage than the money which than what you may think as a benefit out of that money. You need to always follow up every penny which comes into your country and ensure that it serves the purpose and it is within your also cash flow system to understand how it moves. So when I hear the head of state of a country saying that my government has no oversight over this fund, it was told that it shouldn't even sit on the board, it shouldn't monitor, I would get a bit scared. But to me, I think the role which this fund is supposed to play should be actually even funded more by the state itself and other non-state actors. If at all we could get more money generated by private sector, by individuals in Uganda to hold the government accountable, it's very fundamentally welcome. Ugandans, we have money, we have resources, because 500 billion, even if we said every Ugandan is going to contribute 5,000 shillings, those who can manage, you can generate $1 trillion shillings within 2 months to fund activities that hold the government to account. But to think that now children are going to die, that Ugandans are going to be all over the place because of 500 billion, I think it's not correct at all. We need to build that momentum which can make us able to live as an independent state. But finally, I also wanted to comment on some of the limitations or the shortcomings of this industry. I think civil society everywhere in the world plays a fundamental role of holding the state to account. But I think in Africa we have also had an intertwined kind of system where civil society and the political party organizations, the line which separates them is so slim, you wouldn't actually very easily sometimes see the difference. I've looked at some of my friends in civil society organizations, and they know, I'm sure they are listening to me right now, they behave as if they are an extension of the political class. And to that, they always invite government to come in and treat them in the same way it treats their political opponents. And I would think that much as it has to be, the civil society has to be very strong and accountable, you don't need to go into partisan politics to the extent that the head of state can start to say that now you're engaging in subversive kind of activities. And I've been monitoring that. I don't know what Charity would have to comment on that, but I've seen a number of civil society organizations behaving as if they actually are an extension of the opposition politics in the country. Some have even come out unapologetically and said that now actually the NRM government and the president, they fear the civil society or NGOs more than they fear the political parties. So I would think in that way you invite government, you invite because the state is there to protect its power, to protect itself from losing the power. And if you are going beyond the role of the NGO, which it should be playing, I would think that you are inviting the state also to come over to you.
Thank you so much, Ramadan. And of course, before we take a break, I'll just remind us you can stream with us live on YouTube, and that is UBC Television Uganda. YouTube, UBC Television Uganda. But of course, this conversation is going on Twitter. That is the hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. And of course, our handle being at UBC TV Uganda. Probably, Charity, you have to get yourself ready, because when we return, Ramadan highlighted that somewhere, somehow, some of you, the guys that are into the NGOs, have been behaving in a way that portrays you as anti-government, but as well, he did make mention of something to do with we shouldn't cry for the pennies that we have lost out on, because we can still survive minus them. You will as well break down a bit of a picture of what this means. Someone is losing out on the money, the family they have that depends upon them, what they do that other side, and a whole bit of the chain when we do return. This is UBC Behind the Headlines. We shall be returning in just a short while.
You may have heard of physical distancing. This means keeping at least 2 arms length apart from other people at all times to reduce the spread of coronavirus. But why is it so important? Without physical distancing, each person infected with coronavirus will infect 2 to 3 others. Each of these people go on to infect 2 to 3 more, who each go on to infect another 2 or 3 people, and so on. Within a month, the infection will spread from 1 to 406 people. But if each person halves the number of people they come into close contact with, the number of infections drops dramatically. Each person would only infect 1 or sometimes 2 people, and each of those infected people would only infect 1 or occasionally 2 more. So the disease spreads much more slowly. In a month, the infection would only spread from 1 to 15 people. That's the power of physical distancing. Keep at least 2 arms length distance from as many people as you can to reduce infections and save lives. That way you protect yourself, the people you love, and your country.
This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health.
Capital Shoppers. We have a variety of items like foods, garments, cosmetics, and all sorts of drinks. Enjoy your shopping experience at affordable prices in our fully stocked branches in the following areas: in Tinda Stretcher Road, opposite Makere Business School along Portbell Road, Duster Street opposite Nakasero Market, and Garden City on Yusuf Lule Road. To all our customers and suppliers, we thank you for your continuous support. Stay safe, wash your hands, sanitize, and wear your mask always.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go. From now on, we're not going to leave anything on our plates, because we've learned to savor the moments that were always there, and they never tasted this good.
It's edition 29 of UBC Behind the Headlines. My name is Kent, and today we have taken a stroll into the suspension of the Democratic Governance Facility. As we left off for the break, I had actually cued Madam Charity Kalebu Ahimbisiwe to give us a bit of an insight into what this whole bit of suspension means for people like her that is at the helm of one of those organizations, much as it's not directly under the DGF and as such not getting the after effects as of the suspension that came the way of NGOs receiving that kind of facility. But at the same time, the whole bit of Ramadan Gobi making a point that we could still survive minus that kind of funding. Does it make sense, Charity?
Thank you very much, Kent. I want to clearly say that if CEDU has survived, I don't know whether other organizations would survive. I must also say that it was a very difficult time for us because, like I said, people were earning big salaries, and here you are, you're not going to earn any salary at all. I would have told people my salary, but for fear of thieves following me thinking I still have the money, I will not say it. But the money I had was good, and suddenly I had nothing. And the people that we supported did not understand that, and we needed to get the work done. It took resilience. And if you look at the 2021 elections, the question of voter education was highly affected because DGF was not on board. In 2016, we did a campaign that we called Topowa. It was a broad, robust campaign. This campaign managed to reach almost every household. But how did it get there? It's because of the money. Remember the advertising on radio, on TV, community places, Bizindalo, that is money. And as much as we tried to fundraise from our network to be able to support that work, it was very little money. The money that we got from most of our people are in hard-to-reach areas. They are rural people. They'll give you 1,000. They'll give you 2,000. That's the money that they can afford. And really, by the time they give you 1,000, they are happy to give you that 1,000. It's not people who are going to give you 10,000 or 20,000. So the money is needed. And there will be organizations, like he said, that would be buried. This CEDU here is a significant soldier on the road. I think it has a unique testimony to it. Maybe other NGOs might want to learn from it in future.
Charity, just before you continue.
But should we cry over the 500 billion?
Yes, the cry is going to be, the after effects of the 500 not coming any longer is going to be highlighted by you in a little while. I wanted just to ask you, before with the DGF funding your activities, your salary was a particular figure, and we want to believe it's not the same figure, or perhaps it's still the same figure now.
I don't have a salary.
Ah, okay.
I don't have a salary. What I have from UN Women is a contribution. Okay. And even the contribution that I get is also taxed, and I also distribute it across the members of staff to support them for transport. But I don't have a salary. And nobody can believe it.
How does that trickle down to your family?
Oh, yes.
Your members and everyone else?
Exactly. And that is why I was going to tell you that at the end of the day, you suffer. as an individual and the people that I supported, because I had children that I was looking after, that I took on, orphans, I pay school fees for, and I have struggled to pay that school fees. I have had to do all kinds of talk shows, be on every panel, do all consultancies, who has which consultancy from US, Canada, wherever, to support different activities and also support these children. It has not been one easy thing. I never go to sleep. Even at 3 a.m. when you send a WhatsApp, I am awake, because I am trying to get the next consultancy to do, to survive, and to also make the organization go forward. Even in terms of election observation and what we had to spend on observation, I had to do a lot of consultancies to get that money to be able to pay. And our members have also been there doing the same thing. They try to give money to support this process. So it's very difficult. So for Ramadan, who has not sat where I am seated, he is right to say we don't need the 500 billion. It is little money. I mean, it wouldn't affect anybody. It does affect very significantly. I want to tell you, you would actually suffer. The people that you support would suffer. There are points when I did not even have fuel for my car. And I stood by the roadside and I wondered, okay, do I need to drive, or now I need to just sit on a border? You know, you become dynamic. You have to be like that. As in, you don't have a battery for your laptop. The laptops have run out. DGF used to give us so many laptops and nothing is there. But you must get the work done because you believe you're a Ugandan and you're in this for being a Ugandan. But I also want, as much as there's a bit of me that wants to agree with him in terms of saying that when you go into something, if, for example, you've gone into helping girls go to school because they don't have pads, you will do it coming from a place of, this is what I feel I want to do. So me, Charity, I feel we want to promote electoral democracy. And at this point, I see it, the bigger picture for me is, can we see democracy going forward? Can we see Ugandans being civically educated? Can we see them understanding their role that is constitutionally given to them, know your rights and know how to use them? That excites me. And so for that matter, I will be there and do all these things that I'm doing. Now, it is dangerous if you get into a comfort zone of it will always be this money. If it is, then that NGO is going to be buried. And there are so many. If DGF is actually closed, which it is not. It is not because...
It's a mere suspension for now.
Even the suspension is not on. It's not on because the minister said, I'm not going to effect the suspension. And DGF itself said, we do not have the official letter from the government. So we are continuing business as normal. So they have not felt anything Sedu has felt. But how I wish now they would feel it, just for 1 year, the way I did. You would see.
That is a little
what he has just told you now, thousands would all be buried. And then they would wake up and remember that sometimes when people choose to do what they do it because they are Ugandan. Now, Ramadan raised something else there, where he said, but we need the money. Ultimately, I must say, we need the money to progress with the work that has been done.
Yes.
And also because these institutions need this support. And for us to grow and to grow governance, that money is needed. But may the people who give money not also think that the ones who receive it are things which can be walked all over and swung all over and sent everywhere, you know, pocketed, because this is what we want you to do.
Turning them into yes men.
You know, and then running their agenda against the agenda of the Ugandan. They should also have, when they say it is a partnership, there must be a level of respect that you understand that this partnership is being driven by what he told you. The NGOs write their own objectives, their own values, their own goals. So by the time an NGO is writing its goal, its objective, it knows what it's going out to do. So don't start to twist them because you're giving them the money. And so when Ramadan makes that point there, I kind of buy in. at where I think that, yes, if, for example, government had sufficient funds, one of the things they should have done, for example, for this election, was to have supported voter education. But even for Electoral Commission itself, voter education was not sufficiently done for lack of funding. So there will always be need for funding. That is why we borrow. If you look at our budget, the biggest chunk of money there is borrowed money. So we will always need to borrow, and we can't run away from that. We need, but there must be a balance as we do these things. There must be a balance that the people who are giving us this money should also come on board knowing, okay, these people for whom we work with, there is an agenda, and if we believe in that agenda, we join them. If we don't, we let go of it.
Let me turn to Patrick Onen. Yeah. You being at the National Bureau of NGOs, I'm wondering, because when we talk about the DGF, I'm sure economy students are wondering as well, is the DGF an official donor and funder to NGOs in the country? And perhaps, if there are others, can we know them?
You know, this is very interesting first to recognize that in the sector, there are 2,200 plus NGOs, properly registered, doing their work. DGF, as you've heard, is just about 100. So it's about 100 NGOs receiving money from this basket, and 2,100 others are continuing to serve. So just to give you the comparative figures. Now, that kind of fund reminds me of what we have been through. You see, if there's any lesson I personally took from COVID, was to learn to separate between what is important and what is necessary. So much of our money we have gone to buy things we think are actually important, but they are not necessary. And that adaptation is what a lot of the NGOs in the sector had to endure. Now we get to this stage where, for me, the critical question has been between national sovereignty, between national interests and money. What do you sell? Are we going to sell our souls because of about $500 million? This is not to water down the fact that it will have an impact. All those organizations, the trickle-down effect from the economic perspective, I don't even need to go into it. I leave that for Dr. Ngobi to handle. But bottom line is, when faced with such a scenario, we should ask ourselves if some of the few organizations that are receiving this funding are putting it to a direction which puts the entire state uncomfortable in terms of the issues mentioned, in terms of the arm twisting. You cannot sit back and look. You have to take action. And that, to me, is precisely the motivation. It was a question of, must we sell the nation because so many other people are going to be affected? Opportunity costs. You let go to hold the nation together. And for me, that was really the scenario we're dealing with here. And more interesting, as already mentioned, a suspension is not closure. What happens if tomorrow all this is bygone and we get back to business as usual? You have had.
Not even tomorrow, because Charity says that
it seems to be ongoing.
There's a bit of confusion somewhere, somehow, because the purported suspension is actually not a suspension. And everything is moving normally.
And you know why? Because the president's letter was seen.
Purportedly seen.
Purportedly seen. But we have not even seen the purported letter to DGF. It has not been effected. So this was a case of putting the cart before the horse. People carried this issue and took off with it without even giving the
benefit of doubt?
The benefit of doubt to see where is this heading.
Yeah.
And I can understand where this is coming from, because it's coming from the livelihood perspective. Anybody who sees their salary going off, the landlord is beeping, you're not sure where it's going to come from. Things come raining on you, And the next thing is, this government, no. You forget that it may actually be a decision in the interest of yourself as a citizen. Before this funding came, there were NGOs in this country.
Definitely.
So many others write proposals to different other funders. I have given you the example, over 2,000 in existence, and they are delivering on their mandates.
Patrick, let me just seek clarity from you.
Yes.
When we talk about NGOs, you highlighted what they are, what they do.
Yes.
But I'm looking at a scenario where Kent comes up with an organization, and that organization is a non-governmental organization. I mean, if I just came up with an organization, does it qualify it as a non-governmental organization? Or for you to be non-governmental organization, there's a specific criteria that you go through and fulfill particular requirements?
Absolutely. It's very clearly laid out in the laws, but just to summarize it, before you even form an organization, the law requires that you must first become a body corporate.
Yeah.
So you first go to Uganda Registration Services Bureau. Why? Because the law envisaged the problem of no separation between the individual, the originator, Kent, the promoter, and the institution.
Aggregating.
So before the NGO Bureau registers you, you must first become a body corporate. Once you are registered by URSB, incorporated, then you come to the NGO Bureau. And from then on, the rest of the processes follow. We ask you for the set of documents. They know your constitution, memorandum and articles of association, and so on and so forth. So for you to qualify to be an organization, you should have checked off on a list of items. There are others who are registered as companies limited by guarantee, but they find themselves engaged in NGO type work. And it appeared as if at some point that seemed to have been like a hideout, so that you don't seem to be exactly under the NGO Bureau, but also URSB is not really with you. But the law foresaw that and said, for as long as your activities are NGO type activities, you have to come to the Bureau so that you're known. So to create an organization is not just a question of wake up today and you have it. And that is why I will tell you that from 1989, when the National NGO Register was opened, the register has almost 15,000. But we are talking only 2,000 with valid permits. You wonder where have the rest gone? So many are the type you are talking about.
Wow.
And it is not enough to just get a permit and you're flashing and saying, I have an NGO, it is registered.
Okay.
And that's where we come in on the aspect of monitoring. It is one thing to register. But please note, many people register the NGO, and in the first year, they have not even got 500,000 in terms of funding. But it remains in the register. It is a statistic at the NGO Bureau that there is an NGO of this nature. But in actual work, actual impact, there's nothing.
Yes.
I mean, point of information for him, the NGO Bureau is all funded by DGF. So how are they going to survive on their oversight role without this funding?
Please respond to that quickly.
It is not correct. The NGO Bureau receives, however little, funding from government. The only support NGO Bureau got from DGF was on the reflection meetings and the necessary tools. And what are the reflection meetings? Engagement between civil society and the sector. Every quarter, the Minister of Internal Affairs holds a dialogue meeting with some of this funding to engage and enable the sector talk. It is completely outrageous to say it is all funded by DGF, because the statistics are there, the releases are there. The funding that comes to the NGO Bureau can be tracked from the Ministry of Finance, Central Treasury, to where it comes. So from what we receive, NGO Bureau as a government entity is 99% funded by the government. And this is very easily verifiable. What comes from DGF, as I said, was just the support, and that project ended because at that time there was this issue of there's all this mistrust between government and the NGOs. And the issue was, can you dialogue? Can we talk? So we meet quarterly, and we were going around every region, 16 sub-regions of this country, go and make sure the civil society and government agencies, we sit together in one room and discuss our issues. So that was really it. But the rest of the funding, purely state coffers.
All right, thank you so very much, Patrick. Now turning to Honorable Muhanga. And in this particular one, I am taking a bit of a reflection upon that letter, the purported letter the President wrote, seeking that the DGF activities get to be investigated, and more so how the DGF got itself into Uganda. From a point of view of you being a legislator, and more so part of the inclination that the President represents, that's the NRM, do you feel some things happen without the oversight as well as the knowledge of the governance or the people in government?
I really don't think anything would happen at a very impactful sector and then the government doesn't know about it. Nonetheless, for me, I really have a lot of reservations for money that comes from abroad. And I would like to be point blank and side with Dr. Ramadan Ngowi. This money that the governments have been receiving from funders abroad, what impact has it created here? That is so big that if we lose it, the world is going to crumble. Let me tell you, sometimes I hate even reading statistics because I get so depressed. I even tell myself I need to know less. The West has been funding us, the peripheral world, for so many years, I think since 1945. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening. Poverty levels are getting worse. The Africa's peculiar problems are increasing. Disease, wars, hunger, famine. So if this money was so good so that it is going to change our livelihoods, make us better people, how come the world's poorest people are 80% and the rich are 20%? They share 80% of the world's wealth and we share 20% of the world's wealth. Why haven't we ever gotten better with all this money that we are flashing around from the West? If you have read about the delinking, sometimes I become so emotional about some of these things that I think we should delink. For so many years, we have received money from the West. Maybe it has transformed people's livelihoods. But has it transformed our economies? One of my lecturers, I will never forget that professor. One of them died, the other one is still alive. He used to call it AIDS, that aid that we are receiving. Because it has only helped us get more impoverished. It has not helped us get anywhere. Otherwise, we would be talking about now many poor countries are getting richer. Actually, if you look at the statistics, we can see that we are making strides towards the richer worlds. That now 80% of the world's population is sharing about 60% of the world income. And the remaining 20% are at fault. The gap is widening. So why are we receiving this money anyway? And until somebody solves that puzzle for me, I have never been comfortable with aid. Never. I've tried to read so many books about aid. None of them has ever given me a solution. All of them frustrate me more. I even say, why did I buy this book?
I should be visiting you
because
soon.
I get very angry at myself having bought the book and read it and then internalized it and gotten more frustrated.
I will be visiting your library.
It is so depressing, let me tell you. For you to be a Ugandan, receiving money, fighting your own government from within, and being so happy about it. That you can build a house, you can buy a car, you can pose, you have the money, you can travel the world. But the money you are getting is actually where you have been set or set up to fight against your own country. And even the interest of your own country. You know, you can fight a government. That's a different matter altogether.
Yes.
But fighting a country or the interests of your own country, the sovereignty of your own country, betraying your own country's sovereignty.
Honorable.
This is home. You are not going to get any other home apart from Uganda.
Honorable, just to interject and probably get a bit of insight from a government, inclined position, do you probably concur with those that feel and say that perhaps the monies that have been coming, majority of the monies that have been coming from the side of the aid, or rather the donors, have actually been meant for different causes and not the causes for which probably the NGOs and others do stand for?
Now, you see, I am not in, I am in government, but I am not in intelligence.
You are in the
But
field.
let me just give you an example. I am just in the field, like a freelancer, one day here, the other day there. But what I want to give, to tell you is that there are so many things I've been learning through friends, through social interactions, through work interactions. That a lot of people register these NGOs, some of them purely to get work. Because there's no work in Uganda. A lot of people are looking for jobs, very highly educated. They can sit down, write proposals, get money from these people. But he who pays the piper does what? So the moment they send you that money, they will tell you what to do. Somebody told me, actually it's my children who told me some story, and it even frustrated me more. One of the big politicians, who I won't say, he's a politician, he receives money from the Western world to help them maybe raise a political party, or the son was working one day and some money dropped out of his pocket as he was pulling out the phone. And then people were saying, oh, your money has dropped. Atakeshi Amo right here in Kampala. I said, oh, you can't pick it.
Hey.
There's more money at home. Where do you get such money to even that it falls out of your pocket and then you can walk away? There's more money at home. Where is this money coming from? Where do you earn from? This is the money we are talking about. The money that comes in through NGOs gets off. You see, accountability is the easiest thing to do. You know that government servants, civil servants, are the best at accountability. They will cross every T, dot every I. You will never find. Those who have been found, I don't know what happened to them. It's always one of them who becomes a whistleblower and reports the others. But if they decide that we shall make our paperwork and hand it over to the Auditor General, they will do it and you will never find out. But Ugandans, instead of looking for this source, they are hounding politicians. Because politicians have come into these seats because of their vote. But the real person who touches government money is not a politician. Politicians don't sign any check. They don't account anything.
But if we talk of politicians in parliament like yourself, you're the ones that authorize where the monies should go.
Do you sign on a check?
Of course you don't.
You simply authorize and go back home and sleep.
It's possible that you could authorize that Kent gets money, and maybe perhaps behind the curtains, me and you share that money.
Oh, it's quite complicated.
Quite complicated.
Because you can't be just one person to authorize that money, but you can be two people who sign on a check, and you are more into it than the people who just authorize. But one thing I am raising is that we shouldn't think the world is going to crumble because we have not gotten money from some white man somewhere. Who helped them get the money? Why can't we build our capacities here? Like Ramadan said, let us collect 2,000, 5,000 from friends and charities and get our own money. The moment you start relying on somebody, that somebody one day will not be there. Everybody, even in your own family, you must build capacity to look after yourself. You have known families that people look after. Now let me even reduce it to a family level. You need to build the capacity and look after yourself. Nobody is going to look after you forever. For me, I think what Ramadan is saying is true. Here we have built churches. We are building a church here next to a hotel here in All Saints of 22 billion. We have raised it as parishioners of All Saints Church. We have not borrowed. We go to the bank, get a loan, but every Sunday we take the 20K. We even have a bag of 20K where your minimum should be 20K. We put it there. We are putting up a church of 22 billion. Now, if we were collecting this money from Ugandans, it would even be a better deal. Because money that has always come from elsewhere has never helped anyone, any country, anyone.
Thank you so much, Honorable Muhanga. I want us to get to Ramadan, and it's a simple question that I'm putting to you, Ramadan, before we get into the final bend of the episode. This is the episode 29 as it is today. Ramadan, do you feel the NGO activities can be qualified and quantified as economic activities in the country?
Oh, yes. NGOs contribute to the macroeconomy. They play a fundamental role, especially of bringing in some checks on government and government actors or state actors who would want to, to act otherwise. Without NGOs, you might find that the levels of corruption would be very high in this country. Without NGOs, we would find that many of the decisions government take to increase budgets and also achieve what we call allocative efficiency, intra and also between sectors, wouldn't be there. So the NGOs are playing a very, very fundamental role. But as I've told you, in this country, what is killing us now is politics. We have over-politicized ourselves. I've been writing about these things. I'm not beginning today. If you checked my column, Are You Listening, Mr. President? If you Googled Ramadan Govi, Are You Listening, Mr. President? And you see the kind of articles I've written in the last 15 years, you could actually think that I'm a prophet, because most of these things which are happening today, we have seen that, we have talked about them. For example, when did the president learn about these kind of funds of NGO? When did the intelligence organizations learn that the DGF was behaving in the way it is behaving? Was it yesterday when you wrote the letter? Why did they come out now? Of course, because of the paranoia that now we have been in a very contentious period. The politics has been quite at another notch level, and they are now waking up to come and they say, hey, let us act. But I would want to tell you, Tony, that we have written, myself, I've been involved in a number of researches where I've researched water, I've researched areas of environment, I've worked with some of these civil society organizations to do this research. One of the key findings we have always found disturbing is the off-budget funding or financing of some of these agencies or activities. You see, off-budget funding undermines planning and undermines the budgeting processes. You will find the Ministry of Finance, National Planning Authority, and all other players have been complaining about this over years. There is a tendency that Uganda has been running as if, for years, as if it is like a bastard child of no one. Anyone can come and do whatever they want to do in Uganda, and they go away. And at the end of the day, who's the loser? The average person on the street in Uganda is the loser. People collect money and they disappear. They put up a budget and you find that this budget is not integrated in the overall planning and budgeting. I mean the budgets of these NGOs. And it makes accountability and performance measurement very, very difficult. So I would really think that much as we are having this fundamental role played by the civil society and NGOs, it's time that they are regulated in the same way as I call upon this government to regulate all other economic actors, private sector, the religious institutions, and so on. It's not wise for you to run an economy of free for all. The economy should be free, but not free for all. Even football is a free game, but football is regulated. It has a referee. Imagine football without a referee. How would that football look like? And you know, in Uganda, we know that football, we have played it, where we count ourselves and we say we are 11, let us start. The ball goes out and somebody continues playing, scores a goal, and then you start fighting. This is the same way we are operating a country, where we have allowed all economic agents, what we call economic agents or players, include the state, non-state actors, include private sector, include these NGOs and so on. So, my point is, this DGF saga, I know it wouldn't have come had it not been for the politics. The politics brought it, that the president was informed by intelligence that this fund here is the one which is going to end up undermining your power. And for him to protect his power, he acted that way by reviewing it. The same spirit should be carried out in ensuring that all of these economic agents in the country operate in a regulated manner. The other time we discussed about what we call regulatory capture in this country. Everything is captured, nobody is regulating the other. So at the end of the day, you find you have an economy of informal players, you don't know who is doing what, you can't collect enough tax revenue, you end up borrowing a lot of money and putting higher taxes on the very players who would have paid, some small tax to run their country in a productive manner. So it becomes counterproductive to all of us in that sense.
Thank you so much, Ramadan Gobi. It's definitely UBC behind the headlines for you that is just coming in right about now. You must have missed out on so much, but you can still get us on Twitter, that is at UBC TV Uganda. You can also follow the conversation via the hashtag UBC behind the headlines. At this particular juncture, probably just to remind you, in studio with me is Charity Kalebu Ahimbisiwe. We also have Mr. Peter Onen, Patrick Onen Ezaga. We have Honorable Margaret Muhanga, and the man that you just saw on your screen a little while earlier was Professori. That is the man on the screen. Of course, it's definitely two people on screen, but the one that is on the screen that ain't me is Professori Ramadan Gobi. Now, we are into this particular part of the show where I'm going to turn to the two panelists, Honorable Muhanga and Ramadan Gobi, to ask one generalized question to both of the two guests in studio, that is Charity and Patrick, so we can have a conclusive end to this. We shall be starting with you, Honorable Muhanga, and perhaps Ramadan, you're getting yourself ready to do the same in just a little while to come. Honorable.
Yes, thank you, Kent. My first question will go to Charity. It's a norm here that if you appear here, ask the panelists, ask you questions. So my question is, if funding is frozen and you still want to run your NGO and you have a passion in electoral democracy, would you still carry it further by looking for funding from within Uganda rather than getting somewhere where maybe things may change and then you have no authority over them? And now to Patrick. You monitor the NGOs. If an NGO gets money and deviates it for other activities that may undermine the sovereignty of Uganda, and intelligence gives you concrete information that this is what is going on, what are your roles as the NGO board? Do you deregister these NGOs? Do you call them to order? What do you do in those circumstances?
All right, before they can take on that particular set of questions, Ramadan, I'm hoping you're ready as well to bombard us with one general question for both Charity and Patrick, so we can have a bit of responses coming at the end.
Yes, I can ask one question, and I think they will, since they are coming from the same industry, they will help us understand. You know, I was checking, the Freedom House rates Uganda currently as not free. And the NGOs generally, and the subject we have been discussing, DGF in particular, their main intention is to ensure that there is advancement of rule of law and also of good governance in the country. So when the Freedom House ranks us as not free, do you think you still have a job as NGO world, since you have been working, you have been spending this money, 100 billion per year, and according to those who rank our performance, they are saying our governance levels are not free, or they are just free. I looked at also others. So, to paraphrase it, to make it clear, what role do you think the NGO world should play differently to ensure that government of Uganda and the state in Uganda can advance rule of law and good governance in the country?
Patrick, let's actually take it on from Ramadan Gobi's query. What roles should the NGOs play differently to advance the rule of law in the country?
Well, I think NGOs, it has been said over and over again that they play a very key role in supporting government. But the critical thing that needs to happen, for me, I think it's time for the sector to have a self-reflection, to engage and ask whether going forward this is really the direction we should be taking. For instance, why must advocacy become confrontational? There's need to ask these questions. Can't you advocate and call government to order without necessarily knocking heads? Because this is our country. Whether you're an NGO or you're in government, it is our thing. So I think every time we get to this situation where there seems to be so much animosity, for me it is a moment of reflection. And we should engage as a nation and ask ourselves, is this where we want to be? And where do we go from here? That reflection to me will include issues of, if money is stopped today, assuming the donors just wake up and say, with effect from tomorrow, forget this country. Those questions require deep reflection.
Then getting to Honorable Muhanga's question, the question of
yes,
the NGOs. If they got their monies deviated for the activities they were meant to, what kind of specific, call to order do you bring unto them?
First, we make sure we carry out very rigorous investigations as the Bureau. But in terms of reprimands, there are specific actions you can take. You can suspend, you can revoke, you can deregister.
Have you ever?
Oh, yes.
Suspended, revoked, and deregistered?
Oh, yes. I was on national TV myself, Brian White Foundation.
Oh, it had to be that one.
Yes. I mean, you see, ultimately, the others, unfortunately, because if we suspend, that doesn't mean you are completely closed out. A suspension, as it is, may mean you can revert. And we are careful because anything we say as the Bureau about an NGO may actually be blocking them from potential funding opportunities. So and it is our role to protect the sector as well. That's why when it comes to such decisions, we make sure that before we come to national TV like this to make pronouncements, it is actually well thought through and well checked, because you don't want to blunder and end up closing an organization simply because you have made premature statements. But the law is very clear. The sector itself knows. We have clear guidelines on what we do as the regulator in case you find an NGO has become errant.
Wow. Madam Charity, Honorable Muhanga put a question to you. It was basically testing your kind of perseverance. Would you still push beyond your limits to make sure what you do have a passion for comes to pass, even minus any sort of funding?
And thank you, Honorable Muhanga and Kent. Before I respond to that question, 3 things tickled me. 1, will the world end if the funding doesn't come? I think we need the funding. And I want that legitimately understood, that that money is needed. It has supported systems, it has supported the work of civil society, and without it, a lot of civil societies will choke. I don't want that to be lost. 2, must advocacy be confrontational? I want to be bare knuckle. At the time of the elections, when people were dying, even now when people are disappearing, how do you expect that we'll come to national TV and be very civil? Ladies and gentlemen, so-and-so disappeared. Oh, it's very good. Hey, then Gundi died. There are 50 who are dead. So-and-so has been shot. It gets confrontational. There is a time that comes when you cannot be civil. Because at that point, you're thinking like a human being. Your blood has boiled up to the extent that you're thinking, yes, we have spoken about this issue. This is what the law said. The law says the police should protect life and property. And the law says that you have a right to life in Article 21. And then here you are, you're killing people left, right, and center. And then we have to come to TV and be very civil. It can't happen. It can't happen. And that must be remembered, that when you're a civil society organization and you're doing advocacy, there must be a balance. There is a time when you're going to be very punchy, there's a time when you're going to retreat. That said, Honorable Muhanga raises a very significant question. And I think that it is time for all NGOs to think about it, because a time will come when the donor says, I am not going to give you the funds. So what happens at that point? And that is what she's asking us to think through. And she's throwing a very good ball to every civil society in this country. If it were up to me, the doors are open actually for SEDU. We've been asking for funding from all possible sources. We asked government when we were going for these elections to help us with civic and voter education. They didn't have funds for us. We asked different donor entities. That is how we end up with UN Women coming on board. And if they hadn't come on board, even the few university students that we were helping to know how to vote for the first time would never have got that chance. The market women who we managed to meet would never have got that chance. So I really think that the donor money is needed. We really need this support, because as a country we have not grown to grow our domestic taxes, and also the tax base has not grown too well. And to my friend from the NGO sector, there are many times when NGOs feel they're not being protected by the NGO Bureau. Rather, they feel like they're being hounded. We are being chased, we are being put on a ping pong. We should feel that protection which you're talking about, that you want to protect the sector. We should feel that protection coming through at every stage, But right now where we sit, we're actually we're suspicious of what the Bureau means for us. And we're thinking, we've been going for conversations with the Bureau. They know what we do. They know how we feel. They know about, so why do they turn around our backs and issue statements? You cannot talk, and yet they know. The Constitution also says.
Please verify. Did anyone stop you?
Yes, the statement that came out from the NGO Bureau seemed to suggest that NGOs can...
Seemed to suggest.
No, actually, it did suggest. It says, I could read you word for word, it says NGOs should desist from issuing statements about the suspension of the DGF. What are you saying?
And who
Article 29.
Who signed it?
His boss, he's called Okello. Article 29 of the Constitution gives NGOs the right to expression, freedom to opinion, even as citizens, ordinary citizens. Even this whole thing of you're not accredited, so you cannot observe elections, you are a citizen. To participate in elections, you choose 3 avenues. You can participate as an observer, you can participate as a voter, you can participate as a candidate. So when you start to block a Ugandan from participating, remember you are infringing on their right. And I think that government entities need to learn to allow for participation, for inclusion. Because that is the democracy. And I like Golobi's question. You know, I know Golova, so Gobi always confuses me as well. But I see his tweets a lot. His question is the freedom index. Actually, the report they have written is democracy in retreat. Uganda makes very good strides when we look at some of the things that happen. Like, for example, we have a lot of space for online journalists now. We have online spaces where stories are being published. Before, in the past, and I think Honorable Muhanga would say this, we only had newspapers, had print, and then journalists would struggle even to bring out their stories. But you have a lot of this space. But oftentimes, we also see the internet shut down, and these guys cannot publish those stories because the internet is off. And then we also see moments when access to information is infringed upon. We see moments when you cannot use your freedoms as the Constitution does provide for you. So you begin to ask yourself, okay, at what level then are we free to use? I know there are responsibilities for both, because the duty bearer is there, but also as we have responsibilities as citizens. But at what point does government allow us to use some of these rights that the Constitution does provide for us? And I think that is where the question of freeness comes in. And the work that has been done by the support of the democratic governance facility cannot be underscored enough.
Just before we actually say goodbye, Patrick, she did make mention of a directive that could have come their way, you know, barring them from making mention about this kind of discussion we've been having. Is it true? Please verify. In just less than a minute.
Perception in communication is very key. The message was simple. This is a matter that is at cabinet level. Please stay in your lane. She has said it herself, that even the suspension is not effective. And you're already accusing government of from funding DGF issues, we are now on killing and this. First of all, what are you talking about? The documents are there. The statement I issued is all over the place. It was clearly saying, hey, guys, isn't it premature? Now the sector itself is confirming that they haven't even seen that so-called suspension actualized. So if it has not even been actualized and you're already jumping to draw all these conclusions, the Bureau simply said, dear sector members, number one, the president is the fountain of honor. Ramadan mentioned clearly, he is the most informed citizen. By the time you take a decision to affect the livelihood of citizens worth 500 billion, what you're protecting must have higher value. So that statement, on a good day, you can replay it, but it was very carefully thought through. And it is clearly mentioned that the sector is free to speak their mind. It is clear. But somebody said, I don't know who, but there's this thing of this freedom before speech, and let me leave it there. Let me leave it there.
Speech after freedom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, Patrick. Well, for you that has been watching us, it's been the 29th edition of UBC Behind the Headlines, and we've had Professor Ramadan Gobi on Zoom. We've had Honorable Margaret Muhanga in studio with us. It's actually a pioneer kind of appearance. It's probably she'll give us some autographs at the end of it all. We've had Patrick Onen from the NGO Bureau of Uganda, and as well Charity Ahimbisiwe Kalebu, the ED of SEDU, that is the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda. Now, before we go, we are reminding you of 3 or 4 particular things. Remember to wear your mask as often as possible. Forget about us here. There is a bit of protocol we've been following.
You have said
wash your hands with soap and water. If possible, simply sanitize. And where need be, social distance, keep it a distance of about 2 meters where you have a bit of a conversion where there is more than you and others in that particular place. My name is Kent, Tony Kent Kyazze, and you can as well follow me tomorrow on Magic 100 FM, which is a sister station that is from 6 to 10 o'clock in the morning. Otherwise, we thank you for following. I'm not so sure whether it's already another day, but we can as well say good evening, good night, and good morning. See you another time. We love you all. UBC Inspiring Uganda.
This weekend on UBC.
There is a very If you ever felt like the world is against you, this is the show for you.
I spent 6 months nga magulu bagawanise
and
ekiro misana all the time.
Administering this too much dosage on you, like what was happening during that time?
Not really. Their main aim was to balance the legs. I remember, I think it was primary one. I had a sister of mine. She used to take me to school because I couldn't walk myself there.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go. From now on, we are not going to leave anything on our plates, because we've learned to savor the moments that were always there, and they never tasted this good.
Welcome to English in a Minute. 50 years ago, the first humans stepped foot on the moon. But has anyone ever jumped over the moon?
Jonathan, guess what? My book is nominated for North American Wildlife Pop-Up Book for First Time Writers Prize.
Oh, wow. You must be over the moon.
I am, Jonathan. I could not be happier.
What was the name of that prize again?
To be over the moon means to be extremely happy about something. This expression likely comes from a short children's poem from the 16th century called Hey Diddle Diddle. But we don't really know why over the moon came to mean what it does today. And that's English in a Minute.
within the national boundaries. We all need to understand that everybody needs to be safe if we want ourselves to be safe. And within this principle of global solidarity, WHO has called upon all countries to ensure that this global public good, the COVID-19 vaccine, should be acceptable and accessible to everybody, irrespective of the income status or income level. This vaccine nationalism will